Today on Spotlight, now we focus on Hawaiian culture-based education.
Why it's important for students and educators and how it can benefit the wider community. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. This is a special episode for us. One of our sponsors here on Spotlight Now is Kamehameha Schools. And today we're going to be focusing on something that we just talked about, Hawaiian culture-based education. We're going to dive deep with some of the experts and how that's really impacting our students. As always, we encourage those of you watching at home or online to engage in the conversation. You can scan this QR code and enter any questions that you may have for our guests, or you can, of course, type them into the comment section of our Facebook page.
Yeah, and whether you are Native Hawaiian or not, we are all part of this community. And so we want to address both how it affects students of Native Hawaiian descent, but also the impact on the state as a whole. We want to welcome in our first guest right now from the Hawaii Island campus of Kamehameha Schools at the elementary school level, Dr. Ka'ulu Gapero. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, of course. Aloha kako, mahalo for having me.
So I'm so excited to talk about this, and for our audience who may not be in education, may not have children, what is Hawaiian culture-based education for someone who's just not familiar with the concept?
Yeah, great question. I think first of all, it's important to acknowledge and honor the many important people that came before us in this movement, right? That established, Hawaiian language as a priority, our Kulakaya Puni movement, our Native Hawaiian serving charter schools. And so Kamehameha is we're just a part of that continuum right now, understanding that we have, 3 K-12 campuses across, 3 islands and just under 30 preschool sites. It was very important for us to develop a shared understanding of what Hawaiian culture-based education is. So for the context of Kamehameha, and again, it's just a definition, it's not the global definition. I just want to be clear about that. It's really grounding education in Hawaiian culture, Olelo Hawaii, and Hawaiian worldview. It's learning that's personalized for individual learners. It's learning that is responsive to the needs of Aina and Lahui. And it's also learning that is education that is rigorous, right, and relevant to modern environmental contexts and technologies.
And so for those who maybe have not really heard of this or have not been exposed to any elements of this, how does that actually get integrated into the classroom, into the actual teachings when trying to, of course, keep up with all the other tools and instruments that are used in education? How does this kind of factor together?
Yeah, great question. And so really on a more surface level, you might experience Hawaiian culture-based education as the indigenization of curriculum or content, right? For example, situating math in the context of a lokoi'a or a lo'ikalo or a mala, right? But what we know from the wisdom of practice and having served in this area for years is it requires a shift in educator pedagogy. That is how educators engage students with the content, right? Their practice. And so examples of that might be supporting the collaborative talk structures within the classroom, right? So that we have collective social construction of understanding within the class. We might also see examples of students being encouraged to nana meka maka, ho'olohe meka pepe yao, to kilo, right? And then providing them opportunities to really reflect and consolidate their understanding that they're gaining from just deep observational experience. We might see examples where there are cross-generational learning opportunities, connecting hiapo to our poki'i, and that transference of knowledge that can occur both ways in setting up that situation. We might also, for Hawaiian culture-based education in particular, the utilitarian purpose for learning is quite important. That is to say that all learning should have a purpose, right? That learners should be able to see immediate application of their learning in actual context, right? So it helps them better connect with that learning. Just traditionally as a people, right? There was a distinct purpose for why you would learn how to do something, and oftentimes it related to sheer survival, right? In certain contexts. So, yeah.
I mean, what's so interesting to me about this sort of shift in thinking is that when you think about the way we teach children and no matter where you're from, the idea that you should know your history. And so I think when people think about education in this way, they think, well, that means you do Hawaiian studies or Hawaiian history. But what you're talking about is integrating this into, a chemistry class, or,
Right.
tell us a little bit about that, about what that looks like on the ground and how that integration takes place, keeping in mind what Ryan just mentioned, that you also want students to learn about, all things that are, on the cutting edge, if you will.
Right, right. I had mentioned earlier that Hawaiian culture-based education is really about being rigorous and relevant, right, in our modern environmental contexts. And so when we consider Hawaiian culture-based education, it's not just about a promotion and privileging of Hawaiian ways of thinking. There's that as well, but it's for the larger purpose of advancing lahui, of moving kanaka together, right? So it kind of requires this balance between valuing indigeneity, specifically Oiwi Hawaii, and accelerating our collective, right? So creating better conditions for our people.
You are with the elementary school, and so you kind of get fresh minds and are able to really integrate some of this cultural based learning really at a young age. I'm wondering what that evolution looks like for some of these students. There are some who are able to attend these types of integrated learning from an early age, but then you also have those who maybe come from a different background who may not have been exposed to this. They come in maybe in their freshman year of high school. How do you find that balance between integrating those who have knowledge, who can speak Olel Hawaii because they went to an immersion school, as opposed to those who are just learning for the first time?
Yeah, right. So what we know about all education is that it's developmentally appropriate, right? So when we have haumana that come in Papamalao, our kindergarten class, their important issues of lahui and community might be learning how to become a good community contributor, how to become a good hoapapa, a friend within class, right? But then as kids progress through the grade levels and they develop greater capacity and knowledge skill base, they begin to interact with larger issues of lahui, right? Investigating, analyzing, understanding, solutioning for problems that really could, if solved, benefit the collective, not just Hawaiians, but everybody in our island community.
You've been working at the campus now for more than 2 decades, I understand.
Yes.
I'm interested to know what kind of shift you've seen in the students, because clearly you've seen them from a very young age come in and then move on. When you take this approach to education and they're integrated into this kind of learning for a long period of time, what kind of a shift do you see in them?
I think my first introduction to Kamehameha was initially as a student. Started in the late 80s, finished in the early 90s. And at the time, I had the fortune to benefit from some outstanding kumu that really reinforced Hawaiian identity and valued that, right? For example, in our Papa Olelo Hawaii, in maybe a history class, an English class, performing arts program. But those were the valuing of indigeneity was kind of relegated to those types of classes, right? I never experienced a math class that was culturally affirming, right? A science class that was positive identity building as a Kanaka, right? So that was my experience at Kamehameha, late 80s, early 90s. Fast forward to today, our CEO has made it very clear that Hawaiian culture-based education is what all educators are going to use within our programs, right? And so understanding that that's now a common practice, we see very different experience for our kids, right? In all of these content areas, we see culturally affirming practices, culturally sustaining practices, identity building practices across the board.
And what does that do for the student, do you think, when they are culturally affirmed? Can you elaborate a little bit about what kind of a change that brings for them?
Right, right. So we kind of think of it in terms of when students feel as though what they bring to the situation is valued, it's honored, it's respected, it's encouraged, right? That sense of personal identity and what you bring in terms of your fund of knowledge from your kupuna and your ohana and your mo'olelo. Of course, what it does is it builds confidence for the learner, right? Which also contributes to their ability to persevere through challenges, to be resilient. And when we know they have these larger skills of persistence, that also helps them on the academic side to be able to persist through challenging academic situations and beyond outside of school as well.
How do you think that this type of education model is helping the greater Lahui and just the greater Hawaiian community when you look at some of the things that have happened that have really galvanized the Hawaiian community, when there are issues that come up, when there are strong opinions where Native Hawaiians come together? It seems like there has been just this resurgence overall with the overall Hawaiian community. How much of that do you think is based to those individuals who have benefited from this type of education model?
Yeah, so Eo Mailani, who's coming on in a bit, and we had a chance to talk story previously, and we were just reflecting on our experiences at the Mauna, for example, when TMT came about. And it was such a special experience because we saw Kanaka and non-Kanaka gather, Kanaka Oiwi and non-Kanaka Oiwi gather in a space that honored everybody's contribution to that, right? So when we think about Hawaiian culture-based education and how it affirms everyone's individual identity as meaningful contributors to community, to Lahui, I think what we see is just this larger mindset of empowerment, right? Empowerment and kuleana, that not only do I have a responsibility for myself, but that responsibility also extends to those around me, my ohana, my kaiaulu, my community, my Lahui. So we kind of see how that kind of ripples out and moves beyond just our campuses and our programs to really manifest in authentic situations in our community.
How is this for the educators? How do you train up everyone to sort of be on the same page with this kind of thinking? And also, similar question to what I asked about the shift in the students. What is the shift in the teacher when they are able to teach from this vantage point?
Right. So if we look at shifts in teachers, what's pretty fantastic is as educators develop a deeper understanding of our students and their cultural backgrounds, who they come from, where they come from, they're able to connect at a deeper level with our learners, right? They have this deeper pilina, this relationship with them. When educators have that strong pilina with learners, they're able to better meet their needs because they understand fully what they are, right? And that just contributes to a better learning environment, greater achievement of outcomes for these learners. Further, I think it also speaks to, in school environments where Hawaiian culture-based education is strong, what you'll also probably see is a strong professional culture within that environment, because as we value pilina within the classroom and relationships with learners, within and between learners, that practice tends to kind of also be reflected in how the adults in the room, the educators, the leaders interact with one another, because we've prioritized a value of aloha and pilina with each other in the school. So.
This obviously is a priority of Kamehameha Schools and how you folks have integrated it into just the overall curriculum. But there are some parents out there who maybe their kids do not go to Kamehameha Schools, or they're homeschooling, and they want to find ways in which to do something small to integrate this style of learning into just how they bring up their kids. What would you advise for those parents who would like to take part of this, but maybe their kids aren't enrolled in a program that has this type of curriculum?
Right. So there's tons of resources out there. Kamehameha, for example, we have a wonderful division that we're benefiting from the fact that we have a division, KS Kaiaulu, that really provides a lot of online resources, access to scholarship, connections to community partnerships, as well as community resource centers, all for the benefit of advancing strong OEV leaders. And so that's definitely something that the community can turn to. But again, Kamehameha is just one player in that larger game. I mean, we have, our Kula Kaiapuni, our immersion schools that are out there. We have our Hawaiian-focused charter schools that one might connect with, because they also offer programs and resources that the community can take advantage of. We also have partnerships, we have resourcing in even our University of Hawaii system, right? And seeking some of those opportunities to advance oneself, develop oneself professionally. There's also community engagement, right? There are so many community partners out there that are doing great things to lift community, and just engaging in those ways with those different organizations, all different ways to connect, and they're all very meaningful and appropriate.
When you talk about education being culturally affirming, it's very clear how that would benefit the individual, especially people who are of Native Hawaiian descent. But talk a little bit about how this can benefit the wider community, Native Hawaiian or not.
Right. So when we talk about this push to build strong OEV leaders, right, it's not for the singular benefit of benefiting Native Hawaiians. Because when Native Hawaiians thrive, the community thrives, right? It's like impacting one part of your ecosystem. If you're caring for rivers and streams, everything downhill from that is going to benefit as well, because you starting off with a cleaner source, it ends up at a cleaner result. So same thing when we talk about Hawaiian culture-based education. It's not solely for the purpose of just benefiting, Kanaka Oiwi Hawaii. When they benefit, when they thrive, so does our community. So there's really a reciprocal benefit to validating and valuing a Hawaiian culture-based approach to education.
I just want to ask you on a personal level, and I know that this is, you had mentioned that this type of curriculum and this style of learning goes beyond just teaching Olelo Hawaii to students, and it's more about just the overall culture and practices of Native Hawaiian practices. But from your vantage point, as someone who has been in education for over 2 decades, and to see and hear maybe Olelo Hawaii a little more commonly used now. When I often go home to areas like Hilo, I hear it in the market sometimes, right. And you hear it amongst people who are shopping at the farmers market. I mean, it's just becoming more and more relevant in our community. For you, what is that like to know that you maybe had a hand in helping to perpetuate and to really foster this speaking of Olelo Hawaii?
Right. As an ohana personally, we have huge value for Olelo Hawaii. Our keiki started off in Punana Leo Hi'ipepe program at 6 weeks of age in immersion, daycare through Punana Leo. Fantastic program. They continued through immersion. So it's something that we value as an ohana, right? Because we understand that language, embedded within language, it carries the values of our kupuna, our mindsets, our worldview, and to the greater extent that we're able as just people who live here in Hawaii to engage with that, we all develop a greater understanding of and therefore appreciation of the funds of knowledge that Kanaka Oiwi have brought to the table for centuries. And so it's really fundamentally important, and which is why, at least on our campus, we require Olelo Hawaii from Papamalao kindergarten on through 12th grade, and it's just a normal part of our campus practice.
Do you think this has wider application beyond the Kamehameha Schools communities, beyond the campuses that you talked about, so that folks who grow up here in Hawaii, like me, who are not Native Hawaiian, also can benefit and learn from this, in a similar way?
Yeah, there's definitely greater application. I mean, if you look at some of the pioneers in just language movement, some of them were not Kanaka Oiwi Hawaii, yet they contributed in meaningful ways, right? And so when we even think about like our educators, we're not all Native Hawaiians per se, but we're Oiwi serving educators, right? We have an obligation to contribute to where our people are, again, for the benefit of the larger good. It's not just about Native Hawaiians thriving, it's about everybody thriving as a result.
The downstream that you're talking about.
Right.
We're going to talk about some of those ripple effects with our next guest and then continue the conversation with the two together. You're watching Spotlight Now. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Ko Hawaii.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now. We're continuing on in this special programming where we really are focusing on Hawaiian culture-based education. We were, of course, speaking with Kamehameha Schools and learning about how they are integrating it. Our next guest joins us from the University of Hawaii. She is a specialist at the University of Hawaii, Dr. Eomailani Kukahiko. Thank you so much for joining us and for being here. Just in continuing on in this conversation, we, of course, were talking, to Ka'ulu about just the from elementary to high school and how that integration has happened at Kamehameha Schools. But from your vantage point, as someone at the University of Hawaii, how has UH and UH Manoa specifically been able to integrate some of that into the higher education model?
Well, mahalo for that question. You know, as a faculty member, I think it's a wonderful time to be at UH Manoa specifically, or even the University of Hawaii system, both as students and faculty, even members of the community. I think one of the changes that I've seen since, you know, my days in the 90s of being there as a student and now to being a faculty member is I see a lot more presence of Hawaiian culture-based education in the curriculum of classes. And I think that comes along with having a lot more faculty members that are able to bring this knowledge into the classroom. You know, when I first started, people asked me, oh, you teach for Hawaiian Studies? And I'm like, yes, I'm a graduate of Hawaiian Studies, but now I'm actually in the College of Education. So I think it really speaks to having a strong foundation in Hawaiian knowledge, in Hawaiian education, in Hawaiian history, and how that's able to permeate into the different departments. And so now if you look at the campus, you know, we have Hawaiian representation in faculty and poli-sci, the sciences, the med school, law school. So people don't have to think about, oh, if I have Hawaiian knowledge, it's only good in this one space. And I think that was really the goal of Hawaiian culture-based education is, Ka'ulu talked about this idea of affirming. So it's affirming and even having a presence within our classrooms at the K-12 or even pre-K-12 level so that what we learn gets mentored at that higher tertiary level. Now, obviously, I'm a little bit, well, I don't know if it's obvious. Obviously, I was too old to be a part of the Hawaiian immersion movement. I think the first graduating class was 99. But I always was looking at it from the outside, like what a wonderful journey for these students to be able to be educated fully through the Hawaiian immersion, Hawaiian language. And because they were coming to it as second language learners, even though there were at that time many native speakers around teaching them. So that's, to me, one of the foundational things about Hawaiian culture-based education is connection to native language. You know, that is Hawaiian language is one of the official language of the state. So it's not just about, you know, pronouncing things correctly, but really diving into the deeper meanings of what the things mean. And for people that are not Kanaka or maybe even Kanaka that haven't had that kind of access, you know, starting to look around at the names in your community, the histories of your place, the mo'olelo of those spaces, I think that's really an affirming way to begin your journey to olelo and understanding. And so when you think about this idea, the other tenets of Hawaiian culture-based education, and as Ko'ulu said, this is one way of looking at it. The content that we're teaching, you know, are we having Hawaiian history, language, and culture readily available for students of all cultures? We're not just talking about Hawaiian immersion, we're not just talking about Hawaiian culture-based education charter schools or communities. I think statewide, how do we provide content that's going to be relevant in the space that we live in of Hawaii?
Well, and one thing, you know, we had a chance to talk before the show, and one thing that I've been thinking about in the time since we spoke is this idea that all learning is culture-based. It's just whose culture is it? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I learned more as a curriculum studies, kind of studying that in school, and, you know, really think about like, oh, culture. But when we're in school, public school, private school, it is someone's perspective about what is important. So somebody is taking the time to either include your knowledge or not even have it, and they call that part of the null curriculum. Like, is your knowledge even present? So I think Hawaiian knowledge, and I'm hearing, you know, Filipino knowledge, Japanese knowledge, those were not things that were mainstreamed in some of our schools. So we didn't learn those things until we went to college. You know, even though I went to Kamehameha Schools, there were some things that I didn't learn until I was a Hawaiian Studies major in college, and you know that's not any fault of the teachers, but it does show the progression that we're going through as we learn more about our history, as we're able to have more access to our language and culture.
I'm wondering if you can explain what that practically looks like at the University of Hawaii. I know you mentioned that it's not only integrated, it's not, you know, just Hawaiian studies, it's integrated into other women's studies, political science, other areas of curriculum. What does that look like for the student? Maybe one who is from a foreign country or from the mainland. How are they learning, and how is the this type of curriculum being integrated into lessons?
Well, one of the charges that the University of Hawaii has through its strategic plan is this idea around striving to be a Native Hawaiian place of learning. So because we are here in Hawaii, what does that look like, for the sciences, for the maths, just like Kaulu brought up in our last segment. So for the sciences, are they able to take Ike Hawaii or traditional ecological knowledge and integrate that into what they might be learning in the lab? I'm going to speak for the College of Education because there was a time when there were no Hawaiian faculty members there. And now I think that we're really changing. We're really expanding the understanding so that not only Hawaiians are being tasked with learning Hawaiian knowledge, but all faculty members are being asked to learn more about the history. And that's really critical because for even Hawaiians that feel like, oh, I'm shamed because I didn't learn this as a student, there's opportunities, there's an invitation to come in to learn alongside of us. So I feel like, as teachers, sometimes it feels like, oh, we're learning it too, but we want to give it to our students. So I feel like those opportunities through simple Olelo Hawaii lessons or through visiting Aina-based educations and settings, I think that I'm so encouraged every day to just see all the wonderful Aina work that's going on in different communities. And I feel like in almost every community you can access, whether that's lo'i or fish pond or some kind of restoration of natural environments that's so empowering. So I think going back to your question about what does that look like, I think it looks like so many different things, yes.
What kind of response have you gotten from educators, particularly those who are not of Native Hawaiian descent? How do you extend that invitation, and how do you then kind of, for lack of a better word, quality check that that is actually getting back to the students? I think that it can be both ways, right? Sometimes we have students that aren't ready for that. I didn't come here to learn about Native Hawaiian stuff. I don't even know my own culture. But I think the invitation is always there. And then sometimes, just the curriculum or just broadening their perspective to language, or like you talked about, like you hear Olelo Hawaii in maybe KTA in Hilo or different spaces that you didn't anticipate it. And it really is empowering for those students to see the potentiality of education. And a lot of that comes from younger learners. I had this example where I was in a teacher preparation program, and I had 3 different teachers that were preparing to be Hawaiian immersion teachers, but they came from such diverse backgrounds. One, honestly, his entrance into Hawaiian language is through the app Duolingo. So he just kind of fell in love with that and wanted to learn more. And then now he's a Hawaiian immersion teacher. And then having graduates of the Hawaiian immersion programs, these are starting to be my students at the university who come from educational environments that they don't really know it any other way. Normalization of Hawaiian language, normalization of oli and culture, that's just the way it's always been for them. And then also one per person who grew up in a Hawaiian homestead community from another island, but felt such loss and just so happy to be able to access this learning now that she's an adult learner because she hadn't had that kind of access before. So I think people are at all different stages in their learning. And what we want to do is we want to provide them access and also really be responsive to the way that they're going to be able to access that. Like my parents, they weren't of a generation that had access to kaiapuni or the kinds of language opportunities that I have. So I have to be careful, like not to make them feel that kind of shame that comes with that as well.
I'm just wondering, over your time at the University of Hawaii, how you have just seen this movement grow, from just not only the integration into this, but I think that there has been obviously a lot of movement by Native Hawaiians and others who support Native Hawaiian causes. We've seen, students really galvanize around some certain issues. Do you think that this is helping the overall Native Hawaiian and movement and bringing this lahui closer together?
I think allyship is always going to be something that moves Hawaiian education forward, and I really think that by people seeing Hawaiians being strong in their language, I'm not telling you not to speak your language. I'm saying I see you and I want you to speak your language because I know how difficult it is to learn after loss. So unlike maybe some of the oppressive policies of English only, we're only going to do this English, to look at other countries who, multi-languages is just the way it is. I think that I can recognize that in other people and they can recognize that in me. So I feel like that goes back to this idea of affirmation of a diverse learning. And looking back into our history, when we had this I don't want to say melting pot, but then there's all these people coming together and all these languages being spoken. I think that was a thriving time for our Lahui when we were acknowledging, the different languages that came together to build a thriving Lahui.
I'm interested, similar to what we had just talked about with Dr. Capero, this idea of the downstream effect, that the benefit to someone of Native Hawaiian ancestry is clear, but talk a little bit about the wider community and how it benefits, all of Hawaii when you have this kind of culture-based education happening at all of these levels.
Well, I think we've seen these ideas get manifested as we tackle larger Hawaii and maybe even world problems. So as we think about, what is the impact of climate change, or how do we tackle the economics of even staying in Hawaii, I think it's going to take this reliance on indigenous knowledge to be able to allow us to think through these solutions. And I think that the powerful thing about Hawaiian culture-based education is it doesn't just stay within educational fields. The people that are being the problem solvers, the politicians, the lawyers, the doctors, when they have this grounding in aloha aina and these ideas that are sustainable, they tend to think about ideas differently. I know that my graduates that coming through charter schools do. And so I am really interested in, this problem solving based in here kinds of solutions. I think that when we look at the census data saying that half of our Kanaka are leaving Hawaii, I'm like, let's bring those Kanaka back, let's put them in the classroom, and then we solve the teacher shortage and the diaspora kind of exodus from Hawaii. So I just think that Hawaiian culture-based education, whether you call it Ike Hawaii or just Hawaiian knowledge or Hawaiian history, it has this powerful potential because, like Kaulu talked about, it's building these relationships between what you're learning in school or informal learning situations and these bigger challenges that Hawaii faces.
But, being in education, it's very results driven where you're looking to get certain grades and meet a certain standard. I'm wondering for you, as you look at this and as this continues to evolve, how do you measure success here? What would be a benchmark that you would like to see the University of Hawaii achieve? Maybe it's the entire campus or the entire system as a whole. How do you gauge what success is in this area?
That is such a great question. And then I think that people can continually redefine what success looks like. But one of the things that I think about success is allowing students to have choice. I have no problem if students want to stay here, if they want to go away to perhaps continental schools, as long as that was their decision that they made. So for me, I'm viewing success as really learner autonomy. Are they able to be thriving in whatever environment that they're looking at? Another element of Hawaiian culture-based education is this idea around assessment. Is it just SAT exams? Is it just grades? Or are we having these larger conversations around, what does a thriving learner look like? And I feel like that's starting to change. Even universities now are starting to look a little bit broader. Students are able to give portfolios instead of just test scores to show, what they're learning. And I feel like they're really looking for learners that have this kind of wide and foundational kind of OEV knowledge.
I'm interested in the shifts that you see in the students themselves. When students are culturally affirmed in this way, what is the result for the individual, do you think?
Well, I've definitely seen a shift. I mean, I'm in my 40s. I'm not ashamed to say that, but even in that time where I feel like I'm in between a generation of the vanguard of Hawaiian scholars that were the first people to enroll their students in Hawaiian immersion, and this generation of students that are coming out of these immersion programs and maybe even enrolling their own children in Hawaiian immersion, I feel like I'm just inspired constantly by the way that things are so normalized for them, that things that I had to go to college and grad school to learn, that's just a part of their everyday life, right? So whether that's oli, whether that's holding ceremony, whether that's working in fish ponds or lo'i, not to essentialize only the spaces that seem to be Hawaiian, but they can very well be Hawaiian in the supermarket or the doctor's office in the same way that they can be Hawaiian in all of these, typical Hawaiian spaces. And so I think that is encouraging for me, and I'm just looking forward to the time when those folks will be the teachers of teachers the way that I am now.
As someone who is in that higher education model, you have the vantage point of seeing students come in at different levels because of their backgrounds of where they're getting their education. I'm wondering if you see any difference from those who are, say, going through this program, who are coming into the University of Hawaii, who have this background, and others who maybe have not experienced this and maybe are interested. I mean, how do you, what are some of the differences, or are there differences that you see in the type of students that are being already brought up in this type of curriculum?
Well, definitely, I feel like there's been communities that have been more, I don't want to say more privileged, but maybe have more access to the expectation of college going. And I think, you know, where I am now, I don't know that college is for everyone, even though I work at the university. I really feel it depends on that student and the needs that they feel they're serving by the jobs that take on. So as far as what I'm seeing, I guess I'm seeing a lot more students that are intelligent outside of the classroom as well. You know, they're not just the students that are getting A's, but they're also the students that know how to ho'okipa, they know how to feed people, they know how to do all of these things that their community needs beyond just the textbooks kind of learning. So to me, that's what I'm viewing as success, like the kind of person you want in a crunch, you know, situation.
Well, and we are facing quite a few crunch situations. You know, you talked about climate change. We know that we're going to be having a lot of discussions about the future of Lahaina. We know that the issue of TMT and Mauna Kea is not fully resolved. And so when you think about indigenous knowledge and, you know, its application to all of these big issues in our community, tell me a little bit about how you see the folks who have been culturally affirmed in this way taking part in those discussions and the value of that.
I just got chicken skin when you brought up Lahaina. I think that is such, it's such an idea of the potentiality, obviously a space of great loss and great possibility. And one of the things that I've been so encouraged by is to see actually a lot of teachers that were working in Lahaina, that live in Lahaina, really them taking charge for what that rebuilding and recreation, not just on a physical, like what do the structures look like, but rebuilding what it means to be a spiritual place. You know, what is the potentiality of, we don't just build it up structurally, but really take an idea to what would that space look like if we embedded Hawaiian knowledge into it. And so I'm really looking at, you know, the kama'aina of those places to take the lead, and I've been seeing that. But also, you know, for the schools that have been impacted, for the learners that are trying to return to those learning spaces, I just wish them all the aloha, you know, from all parts of our islands.
We're going to continue this conversation. We're going to invite Dr. Gapero to come back and have our two guests discuss this together. You're watching Spotlight Now. We'll be right back after this.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight Now here as we continue on in our conversation about Hawaiian culture-based education. We are joined now by both of our guests once again who are resuming as we resume in this conversation.
Yeah, and we want to start with this idea of education as a continuum. So I'll start with you, and then for the same question for you. How do you feel like the work that's being done at the university informs the work that you're doing at your campus and vice versa? We'll start with you.
Right. And so, I can only speak to personal context, right? And I'm not fully knowledgeable about, all the partnerships and continua that are happening. But I can say that just in my experience, being a recent student and graduate of the doctoral program in the College of Ed, it's an opportunity to, from the university, learn about some of the best practices that have been identified through research and the literature that's there, and incorporating some of that back home in our, K-12 school system, and vice versa, right? It's about taking the wisdom of practice that we develop as actual classroom practitioners working with our young learners and sharing that experience at the kulanui, the university level. It's a nice cross-pollination, I guess, of Ike, of information and experience. And so that's kind of been my experience. I know that there are other situations out there, like with Navahi, for example, that has partnerships with UH Hilo, right? And so there's a direct through line that, some of the university kumu come and they teach within the immersion program. And so there are many different examples out there of how that partnership works and how they work together to advance this movement.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts about how the work that's happening on his campus and the other Kamehameha Schools campuses informs then the work that happens at the university level?
Well, I totally agree with the early college and the pathways, the increased pathways for students, not only to take college courses, but to really just begin their relationship with university professors. And I think that's been really positive in the charter schools, immersion schools, to have that kind of access. I was sharing with Ka'ulu, it seems like we might have been at Kamehameha around the same time, but there's, in my college, there's actually a lot of Kamehameha graduates and stuff. So I think that one of the things that we do a lot is have these conversations around our kuleana, being gifted, through the legacy of Pauahi. What is our kuleana now? Is it, working with Kamehameha? Is it working with our public schools? Or where do we fit into this continuum that you talked about? And I really feel it's like everywhere, all at once.
The answer is yes. Yeah.
All those things,
right.
yes.
And Ku'ulu, for yourself, I mean, when you are looking at some of the success stories of your own students that have come through and that have maybe moved on to the University of Hawaii, how have you seen your students grow? And have you been able to connect with any of your students after maybe say they go to the University of Hawaii in this and seen the significant difference that they have made and how they've grown beyond just, the K through 12, but beyond in the higher education model?
Yeah, definitely. Having been a part, I've been blessed to be a part of the Hawaii campus at least since its early years, where we first started the high school with our first graduating class, and of course we developed a really deep pilina in those early years with our kids, and it's really wonderful to see where they've come in life. They're now all older than I was when I first started working with them, and so it's neat to see that at their age and what they're able to accomplish. We have like Dr. Noel Peralto. He's doing amazing things for our community on our Hamakua coast, and it's just we see them serving as the strong OEV leaders that we're hoping to continue to build within our haumana. And so the great thing is we have now these examples to point to be able to say, this is a kanaka that looks like you, that sounds like you, that talks like you, and they're able to do it, right? And you're able to access that ike and to have conversations with people who have come before, and it makes access to possibilities and realities much more accessible to all of our learners. So we can capitalize on the graduates that we've had to continue to inspire the current haumana that are there. And we even see examples of graduates who have left our campus, for example, now coming back to work, and serve as kumu in different capacities. And even through that experience, what we're finding is it's a different kula than it was just 10 years ago when they might have been a student. Right, so they get to kind of experience what the new Kamehameha is about, and there's learning for them too, right? In adapting to, from schema that they left with to now, this is our reality, and how do you adapt to that? How do you also continue to grow and push professionally to now serve our OEV leaders based on what the current needs are?
You know, you talked about how the university is striving to be a Native Hawaiian place of learning. Where do you hope this goes? You know, is there application and integration at the DOE level, for instance? How do you hope that this movement, you know, reaches more students?
Well, I definitely think that there's more of a Hawaiian knowledge presence in the DOE than ever before. The creation of the Office of Hawaiian Education has been an institutionalized movement of the DOE to really prioritize Hawaiian knowledge and learning. You know, I know that a lot of time they take on a lot of kuleana, they take on immersion schools, they take on Hawaiian studies in all the schools and whatnot, but they have a great team. And I really think that through Naho Pena'o, these are very DOE frameworks, they're trying to infiltrate every single school in Hawaii in public education so that every learner feels that their education was really based in the context of Hawaii learning. So I think that's one amazing thing that's going on there. And then, you know, Ka'ulu talked in the last part about, you know, his Hikimetu Hi'ipepe. That's the very baby learners and stuff. And one of the privileges that I get is to work with doctoral students, PhD students, ed-doc students, and so to see the options that are available from babies all the way up to these, you know, the highest degree at the doctoral level. I am just so encouraged by the research that's going on that is drawing on other kinds of Hawaiian research to put this research forward. And one of the things that I think about these learners is that when they go into whatever spaces they might be in, OHA, OHE, KS, they're really innovating in those spaces as well. So it really takes Hawaiian knowledge and Hawaiian history beyond any of these four walls, I guess, that we work in.
Yeah, and same question for you. Where do you hope this goes? Where do you see the application of Hawaiian culture-based education, you know, for the larger context of the entire state and perhaps beyond? I mean, you talked about how many Native Hawaiian families are now living on the continent and hopefully trying to engage them in some of this as well.
Right. Yeah, and as you talked about earlier, you know, that diaspora, right? One of the larger issues of Hawaii is just being able to sustain yourself here, to live here, given the median home price nowadays, right? So where I see this, and I'm hoping that we develop these strong OEV leaders that have a mindset of pono, to be of service, to the larger community, and to be able to solve issues like that, like affordability, like food sovereignty, you know, things that if solved would completely, you know, turn us around, would really benefit us as a collective, as a whole. I'm hoping to see people in positions of influence to be able to advocate for the needs of where we live, of our people, of, you know, of our Hawaii residents. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for ultimately.
You know, we've talked on this program about this concept of rediscovering Hawaii soul, and it's a movement that is really being spearheaded by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative. And really what it is, it's in essence, a return to some, you know, ancient Hawaiian practices, a lot of traditional values that are being instilled and trying to be used in conflict resolutions and trying to discuss issues that are happening and how we find commonality in that. We spoke with Hawaii Island Mayor Mitch Roth on this program. He talked about the Ahupua'a system that has almost been used in the county of Hawaii when just trying to make decisions in sort of issues that are happening in different Ahupua'a as it pertains to the elements and things that are happening in each of the various communities. I'm wondering, as we continue on in this advancement, as leaders now look to ancient Hawaiian practices and traditions, does that at all put any more pressure for educators like yourselves, because you are helping to not only framework and shape these students, but also ultimately helping to change the way in which leaders are now governing and leading and looking for ways to bring back some of those practices? Eo Mailani, maybe we'll start with you.
Oh, great question. You know, you had me thinking about this, Olelo no eo, I ka wā mamua, ka wā mahope. And this was something that was said by one of the kupuna, Anakala Eri Ka'ana, who grew up, you know, in a fishing community on Hawaii Island. And I really think this, Olelo no ea, really personifies this idea of, you know, in the past we'll find answers for the future, but also it gives us the opportunity for innovation, right? We do not have to only be constrained to the way things were done in the past, but we use our best understanding and knowledge to move forward. You know, so I've heard conversations about, are Hawaiians able to name new rains, new things? You know, how do we based on this changing environment, how do we create new for the future? And I really think that speaks to this idea of Hawaiian modernity. Yeah, how do we send our keiki forward with being very grounded in where they came from? So I guess that's my manao.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when we look at concepts like axioms, olelo no eao, right? Are we relegated to what's in our puke, or do we honor that? Do we all fully deeply understand that? And are we allowed to then move forward and start to create our own based on how the environment, how ecology has shifted and changed since the creation of these, how many centuries ago, perhaps? And so it's really about, again, kind of what we talked about earlier, this idea that we have these strong OEV leaders that are in positions where they bring as a fund of knowledge a deep awareness of Hawaiian methodology, thinking, mindset, worldview, to be able then to apply perhaps solutions that might have been considered ancient into new and novel contexts to be able to solve for today's issues, right?
You gave us a resource earlier, and I want to make sure that we put that up on the screen again for either parents or educators or students themselves who are interested, who may not be part of either of your campuses. What is your best advice to them about how to start to get involved in this, to learn a little bit more, to be curious?
Yeah, again, really, it's just seeking out opportunities to connect, whether it's through, officialized programs like the University of Hawaii System or KS Kaiaulu, or through organic opportunities that happen through perhaps maybe fish pond engagement, right? When they have community days to participate and to contribute in that regard. So it's really about looking for those opportunities to connect in service and to engage with OEV issues in ways that you're able to contribute to forward movement, to advancement, to collective lahui lifting.
Yeah, and what's your best advice for folks who are curious and may not themselves even be of Native Hawaiian descent, or perhaps they are, but haven't had the access that we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I had a chance to look at some of the resources that, Kamehameha Schools is always beautiful websites, and I think that not only that, but connecting to those individual organizations. I talked about there's so many organizations in every community. So when I was looking at that one, I saw Kaulu Akalana, and I had only been there one time. That's Ulupo and the restoration that they're doing there. It's amazing. The things that are going on, restoration, just connection with Mo'olelo in place, it's amazing. And I, having teenagers in the house, I'm always like, can you put down the tech? And can we go outside? Can we connect? Can we get, our hands like huli kalima ilalo, so that we can build our pilina with Aina and then maybe through these websites. So that's my encouragement. Yes, I love all the tech, and I feel like more than ever, we have access to digitized repositories that we never had before. So that's amazing. But then also don't forget about, leaving the virtual spaces and getting out there as well. Mahalo.
Yeah, before we let you go, I just, I just can't help but reflect back too to just see where we've come. I mean, I remember when Uluka was like my favorite website to be able to just it's still around. I mean, it's such a great tool. But that is when I had that when I was in college, and I can't imagine the advancements that has happened because at that point in time, that was such a groundbreaking tool to have for Aloha Hawaii speakers. As we wrap up here, just your final thought and your message of where we were as a community and where we're going. What excites you? What have you been most surprised with as we look forward in this discussion about culture-based learning?
If that question was for me, I think that being kind to ourselves as well. We came through a space of not having access, not having this curriculum present in our schools and stuff. So that can be discouraging, for older learners and stuff. So sometimes the little ones can be impatient with their parents or grandparents, like, oh, this is so easy, why don't you know this? But I think that those intergenerational connections are going to be what takes us through. So I think just being kind to ourselves and being patient when we don't know everything that's out there.
Right, and we won't know everything, right? We come with our Ike and we contribute the best way we know how. I just think it's very invigorating to see that this movement it's growing in scale, right? It's not limited to just Hawaiian immersion or Native Hawaiian charter schools. I mean, we're seeing it happen like you talked about in the DOE and trying to just impact the community at scale. And so to me, that's really inspiring to see that's happening, right? It's a beautiful thing.
What a wonderful conversation. It's been so much fun to have both of you here, and I'm so inspired, especially at a time when, you know, a lot of the conversations on television can be fairly negative. This one is just so inspirational and hopeful. I really appreciate you being here. We'll be right back after this. Of course, you can catch this on our website, watch anytime. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
And really, like I said there at the end, inspirational to hear about what's happening, you know, from 6 weeks old, he's saying, all the way to the doctorate level, to hear about how culture-based learning has permeated all these spaces, and also how it is for everyone who loves Hawaii and who may not even be in the state at the time.
Yeah, and we really just have heard and seen from them firsthand of just how the integration of Hawaiian culture into learning is helping students not only you know, in the elementary to high school level, but beyond, and how the University of Hawaii has integrated it into their curriculum as well. We heard from both of them of just how this has also helped the broader community and how it has engaged the Native Hawaiian community as a whole, and really addresses some of the issues that we have seen come up in the news. We talked about TMT, we talked about some of the other conflicts that have happened with the Native Hawaiian community, and how this has really helped to galvanize them with just this simple way of learning.
Yeah, and we know that Indigenous knowledge is so valuable, has so many applications. But I really liked when they talked about this idea of things being, lessons being culturally affirming, and how empowering that is for the individual and how that ripples out to the wider community. Next week on this program, we'll be talking with Maui Mayor Richard Bisson, talking about future plans for Lahaina, and certainly some of the learning that we talked about here will come into play in future plans there.
That's right. A lot happening, of course, on Maui, with fires continuing to plague that community, how they're responding, and get an update as the 1-year anniversary of those wildfires in Lahaina are approaching. Will be great to catch up with the mayor to get his thoughts. We're leaving now with a beautiful shot of downtown Honolulu. Have a great day.
Aloha.